So the practice that I'm going to walk us through this evening is sort of a combination of several practices. It's taking the traditional Tonglen practice and applying a self-compassion overlay to that. So we'll start with focus on ourselves, and then we'll focus on people we care for, and then we'll actually focus on people we might find to be difficult. So if at any point during this practice, if you feel at all uncomfortable or just not interested in what I'm sharing, feel free to tune me out and do whatever is best for you. So I'm going to invite you to sit comfortably. Since this is a self-compassion practice, I mean that. So check with your body and find what position feels best to you right now. You can lean back. You can maybe sit with your back straight and shoulders rolled back, or you just want to rest on the seat behind you. And take a few deep breaths to settle your mind and become aware of your natural breathing rhythm. Letting the body help you to arrive in this space and in this moment. Breathing. And if you feel okay to do so, bring to mind or focus on a difficult or painful situation, such as feelings of inadequacy or grief. Again, not the worst situation, please. Just something that is somewhat troubling. And if you feel comfortable, you can place a hand on your heart to maintain steady attention and acknowledge your pain. And with the next inhale, visualize taking in the darkness, heaviness, or discomfort of your suffering. Imagine the substance and grit of the pain entering your body. And with the exhale, visualize sending out light, warmth, and compassion. Breathing in the heaviness and exhaling light, warmth, and compassion. Having been transformed in your heart. You might try to picture sending out a soothing antidote to your suffering, such as positivity, forgiveness, or even relief. allowing everything to be just as it is. We're not trying to make the pain go away. We're not trying to force anything. We're just experiencing it as we breathe in and releasing as we breathe out. You might notice that the experience of the suffering shifts, maybe just a little bit. Maybe it's a little less heavy as you breathe it in. And hold it in the arms of compassion. And breathe out with warmth, acceptance, care. And after a few cycles, allow yourself to rest in the open, spacious feeling that may be arising. Relax any effort and simply be with yourself and your experience. And now, if it feels comfortable to do so, bring to mind someone you care about. And if you can, imagine taking in their suffering. Visualize yourself breathing in their pain, fear, or sadness, and holding it in your heart center with care and compassion. And as you exhale, send out relief, peace, and love. Repeating this process several times, alternating between taking in suffering, holding it with compassion, and sending out relief. You might notice your mind wanders, or even a bit of resistance to this experience. And notice if there's any judging to any of that. Just noticing, acknowledging, and letting go. And returning to the breath. Compassionate breath, breathing in. Holding with love. And sharing love back out again. And you can stay in that practice if that feels more comfortable to you, or you can even stay in the practice of sending yourself the care you need. But if you feel you can bring to mind someone who's difficult for you, see if that's something that feels comfortable. Again, it helps to start with someone who maybe just rubs you the wrong way, and not someone who is most challenging. You might imagine yourself breathing in the difficult feelings associated with this person. And as you breathe out, reflect that this person is the same as you and wants to be free from suffering and problems. And as you reflect on this difficult person, shifting your in-breath to breathing in what feels needed for you in this situation. Strength, calm, patience, whatever it is you feel you need. And once you have filled your body with that which you need, as you breathe out, perhaps use a compassionate phrase that you can recite to wish that person freedom from suffering. For instance, as you breathe out, you might think, may you be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. So breathing in what it is that you need in that situation regarding that person. And breathing out wishes for them to be free from suffering. And as you do this, you may notice what the body is experiencing as you fill it with what it is you need, and as you wish well-being for this difficult person. And a few more cycles, breathing in what you need, and breathing out a wish for the end of suffering. And now letting go, focus on this difficult person and inviting to extend your compassion to all beings, all around you, nearby, and far away, just emanating this wish, including yourself as you breathe in and out. If it helps to recite the phrase, "May you be free from suffering and causes of suffering for all beings." Allowing this wish to fill your heart as it fills the space around you and beyond. Letting go of that practice, and for the remainder of the meditation, enjoying the experience of the breath just as it is. the author of the Dalai Lama's Cat. I need to read that book. It sounds fascinating. Have some of you read that? Interesting. His name's David Mickey. I'm going to fight with this all night. States, when we're familiar with the true nature of consciousness as boundless and peaceful, we may feel a more heartfelt resonance with the ultimate statement of compassion expressed by Shantideva with such transcendent beauty. For as long as space endures, and for as long as living beings remain, until then may I too abide to dispel the misery of the world. So this evening, I'd like to share some thoughts on compassion. It's something we are invited to practice and to be in the Buddhist tradition. And I find myself pausing from time to time and wondering, what does it mean to practice compassion? Can you all hear me okay? Okay, good. Thank you. Appreciate that kind response. And what does it mean to actually be compassionate? How do I know if I'm practicing compassion? Like, really know. And for that matter, why is it so very important? And perhaps I'm alone in these musings. And it's my hope that what I share this evening will be of some use to you, nevertheless. Compassion is a core practice in Buddhism. The Buddha taught that it's one of the 4 divine abodes, or brahmaviharas, along with loving kindness, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, which arise through meditative practice. It is defined in Buddhism as the desire to end the suffering of all sentient beings. And this is reflected in the Buddha's stated sole purpose of his teachings, understanding that there is suffering and the end of suffering. According to Nicholas Rybush, the director of the Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive, the Dalai Lama said that of all the Buddha's teachings, the most important is that of compassion. And of all the qualities of a Buddha, the best, again, is compassion. Even a Buddha's omniscience depends on compassion. It is only through the power of compassion that it is possible for the wisdom, realizing emptiness, to become the ultimate wisdom of a Buddha. Rybush goes on to say, as I understand from the teachings of my own precious teacher, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, the principal cause of enlightenment is bodhicitta, the determination to reach enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. Bodhicitta arises from great compassion, which is generated in dependence upon each and every sentient being. With great compassion, one not only feels the suffering of all sentient beings as one's own, but it is also compelled to do so, as one's own, but is also compelled to do so, something about it. This feeling only grows as one approaches enlightenment and remains with one forever, even after enlightenment. Therefore, a Buddha has no choice but to help sentient beings in whatever way possible. Avalokiteshvara, also known as Guanyin, who we have with us this evening, is a bodhisattva associated with great compassion. Guanyin, she who hears the cries of the world, is the Buddhist embodiment of these virtues. She's sometimes depicted with 1,000 arms and an eye in the palm of each hand, at the ready to see suffering, face it, and dispel it. From the teachings of the Buddha and the symbolism of Guanyin, we understand that compassion is valuable for our practice, for our well-being, and for the well-being of others. So let's do a deeper dive into what compassion is. In teaching self-compassion, I've learned that compassion is not one thing, but a process, which involves several steps. The first step is just becoming aware of suffering. We are mindful of what is and notice that there is suffering. The second is experiencing a response to the awareness of suffering. And the third step is a desire to end the suffering. Dr. Kelly McGonigal of Stanford University adds to this definition by saying it is an emotional response that coordinates our brains, our bodies, our thoughts, and our actions to allow us to respond skillfully to suffering or pain. She goes on to say, it is an innate biological impulse to connect. An impulse to connect with others when confronted with suffering, which motivates a desire and action to relieve the suffering, ultimately changing our neurochemistry to one of courage and hope rather than fear and overwhelm. This compassionate response involves not just feelings, but an energized, proactive, biological process that provides a sense of reward and strengthens motivation to help others. That's pretty cool. In understanding what compassion is, it helps to look at how it is different from sympathy and empathy, which are a part of the process that is compassion. Sympathy is when you understand what someone else is feeling. Empathy is when you feel as they do, and compassion is your desire to relieve the suffering. Dr. Alison Pimentel, the director of Mindful USC, offers these thoughts on sympathy, empathy, and compassion, and I share them with deep gratitude in their entirety, as I could not say this any better. So she starts, what is sympathy? Sympathy is an understanding of someone else's misfortune. At a time of so much suffering in the world, sympathy is essential. Without it, we run the risk of descending into selfishness, indifference, and greater despair. When we sympathize with others, it is possible to recognize their humanity, our common humanity. However, the near enemy of sympathy is pity. It has us hold others at arm's length, feeling somehow superior to them, emphasizing their suffering rather than their agency and resilience. I love that point. We can lose sight that people have some capacity to get through their difficulties. And this is a lesson I learned many years ago in my work with survivors of domestic violence. The desire was to convince them of the right thing to do, when all that could really be done was offer unconditional support and respect for their agency. That was a hard lesson. Pimentel says sympathy's shadow is detached, judgmental. It takes little responsibility for assisting those in need and bears little resemblance to Guanyin's embrace. So what is empathy? Empathy sprouts from the same root as sympathy, the Greek word pathos, which means suffering or feeling. However, empathy moves beyond sympathy because it involves the ability to share viscerally in someone else's experience, to feel their joy or their pain as if it were your own. So of course, we don't actually feel what the other person is feeling. All we can truly feel is our own physical and mental sensations in response to our perceptions of the other person. I think that's a really important thing to remember. Even in empathy, we aren't actually experiencing the feelings of the other person. But Pimentel says, in fact, we recruit similar parts of our brains when we experience our own emotions as we do when we witness the emotions of others. When we're empathetic, we have put ourselves in their shoes and also in their brains. Back to Kelly McGonigal, she describes something called brain synchronizing, in which offering empathetic support goes into the brain of the other and alters it, creating an analgesic response. Hand holding, if you're in pain, someone you love holds your hand, it really helps. It really makes a difference. Even if they're in the room. She did a study where they're, outside the room and they're inside, and the closer they are to you, the better it feels. It changes the brain chemistry. Dr. Pimentel says, yet being in another's shoes or brains can lead us to feel overwhelmed. The psychiatrist Dan Siegel did a study of brain activity when viewing images of a car crash. He noted that depending on which areas of the brain lit up when looking at this image impacted how the participants responded to that image, meaning that where it lit up was significant in saying this is how they're responding to this image. The difference was whether they put themselves into the image or not. So he talks about areas of brain that are me and areas of the brain that are not me. And this can actually be a practice when you notice feeling overwhelmed by witnessing suffering. You can say to yourself, not me. You might wonder, does that feel a little cold? And we'll see how you feel as we go on, but me or not me? So whether they envisioned a car accident and how they would be in that experience, or witnessing it from a different perspective, okay? So back to Pimentel's discussion. When confronted with the suffering of mass shootings or masses of unhoused people living on our streets, we might simply shut down because the problem seems too intractable, too big to bear, impossible to hold even with 1,000 arms. Empathy in this form becomes a barrier to action. It can paralyze us. This is called empathetic distress. There are other shadows that darken empathy. We humans have the tendency to feel deeply for suffering of members of our own group, while at the same time being afflicted by a strong in-group, out-group bias. Empathy for our own can justify denial of or even violence against the other. This us versus them mentality is the nefarious basis of the ills and isms that plague humanity and the planet, including colonialism, genocide, violence, oppression in all its forms, war, religious persecution, and the degradation of the natural world. As the humanitarian Dr. Paul Farmer asserts, the idea that some lives matter less is the root of all that's wrong with the world. So what is compassion? Compassion extends beyond sympathy and empathy. It involves deep feeling plus wise action. It's described as the quivering of the heart in response to another's suffering and the movement toward alleviating that suffering. Compassion shares shadow sides with sympathy and empathy, pity and paralysis. But when compassion takes the form of meaningful action, it can counter the feeling of being overwhelmed because it allows us to channel our feelings into a concrete way of expressing solidarity and support for those in need. So again, thank you to Dr. Pimentel for these wise words. To expand on this just a little more, Tanya Singer, professor of social neuroscience, says empathetic distress can lead to personal distress. But compassion has a protective nature. It comes from the care center. So those areas that light up in our brain when we are feeling compassion is the care areas. And it is love. You cannot have too much love. Empathetic distress is all about me. How can I get out? How can I feel better? How can I save myself? Compassion is about the other. Rather than pain centers lighting up in the brain, you have care and love centers lighting up. So is that helping to make a little more sense as to what Daniel Siegel was talking about, the me and not me practice, right? Because if you're putting yourself so much into that situation, then you can't see clearly the pain of the other because you're too much awash. That doesn't mean that there's not value to experiencing some level of that empathy, but it is helpful to have some perspective. And what science now teaches us is that it's not compassion that becomes fatigued, but getting stuck somewhere in our response to suffering before we reach the point of action. that causes the feel of overwhelm. And remember what Kelly McGonigal said happens when we are compassionate. When we respond with compassion, we feel connected, hopeful, and courageous. Perhaps we find it easier to reach that point of action in the process when we perceive those who are suffering as deserving of our compassion. Remembering the shadow side of empathy. What happens, though, with people who we perceive as difficult in some way? Sharon Salzberg writes, we may look at someone's behavior and we might say, I would never do that. But to say, I have never seen that quality of rage inside of me. I have never seen that quality of desire inside of me. I have never seen that quality of delusion or confusion or infatuation inside of me. A truly honest person would have quite some difficulty saying that. And Thich Nhat Hanh taught that we all of us, have the seed for everything within our store consciousness. It's just a matter of what we water as to what grows. From Sharon Salzberg again. For example, we see anger come up in our minds. It's not that we say, I'm bad, I'm wrong, I'm horrible. Or we see someone acting out of anger. It's not that we condemn them, but rather we see the suffering of it. It is tremendous suffering to be lost in a state of hatred. And that to be an incredibly powerful statement. We can see that, and we can feel some compassion for ourselves. And when we see it in others, we can feel some compassion for them. Tibetan master Mingyur Rinpoche reminds us that all living beings wish to be happy and free from suffering. But what access do most beings have to wholesome practices, leading to wisdom, to end suffering in themselves and others? Instead, many try to find this outside of themselves and to blame others for their pain. I try to remember to think to myself, when confronted with unwholesome behavior, that this person is acting out of unmet needs. Through research and study, it's become more clear that simply practicing mindfulness is not enough to bring about wisdom and compassion. We have to practice compassion for it to arise in those difficult moments. The good news is that it can be taught, developed, and learned. Remembering the practice that we did at the beginning of the evening. And as many have said, including Thich Nhat Hanh, the first step in becoming more compassionate is learning to be compassionate with the self. So I'd like to just take a moment and walk us through what's called a self-compassion break. So once again, just allowing your body to be in a comfortable position. And resting your awareness in the body as a whole. Notice the breathing, moving the body in a gentle swaying motion. And then as you rest in breathing, bringing to mind something that has caused you some level of suffering, some event. Think of something specific. Again, it doesn't have to be the worst thing, just something even a little small. Maybe driving, somebody cutting you off, the sense of someone being rude, just bringing to mind a specific experience. And now that you're in that experience, saying to yourself, this is a moment of suffering. Or whatever words make the most sense to you. It could be, this hurts, or this is frustrating. Trying to remember how you felt in that moment, aiming mindful awareness of what is. This is a moment of difficulty. And then moving on to an awareness that suffering is a part of life. Other people feel this way. Maybe even thinking, I'm not alone in feeling this feeling when this happens. We all struggle in our lives. Recognizing the common humanity of your experience. And if you feel like you would be comfortable doing so, you might put your hands over your heart and feel the warmth of your hands and the gentle touch of your hands on your chest. And as you do this, saying to yourself, may I be kind to myself. You might even try asking yourself, what do I need to hear right now to express kindness to myself? Something like, may I give myself the compassion that I need? May I be strong? May I be patient? Coming up with whatever phrase is most needed to you in that moment. And offering that compassion to yourself. And gently letting go of this practice and bringing awareness back to the body as a whole. back into this room together. It's just a little self-compassion break. It can be used any time of the day and will help you to remember to evoke the 3 aspects of self-compassion, which is mindfulness, being aware of how you're feeling, having an objective awareness of what's occurring, recognizing that you're not alone, and then offering yourself what you need in that moment instead of just letting it go. I'd like to add one more thing in taking compassion a step further. In order to find it in the world, we actually have to be it rather than having it be transactional in nature. And I'll share a story with you. I hope it's not too out of the rest of what I'm sharing tonight, but I wanted to share this story. And the other day I went to pick up groceries. I had much to do, so I did a pickup order. And when I pulled into the pickup order parking area, another car pulled in right before me. And I had all the thoughts. This will make me late, blah, 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 blah. Me. And as I sat there, a young woman got out of the other car that had just pulled in and went to her back seat and came back with a young baby. And my heart melted. And we both sat there. I was in my car and she in hers in her front seat. And I watched this young mother gently hold the baby in front of her, smiling and swaying. It was so beautiful. And then another young woman came out from Kroger pulling 2 carts by herself. She first went to the young mom's car, and I jumped out of mine to help and overheard the young mother so kindly thanking the young lady who brought her the groceries. And I could go on about what we said to one another with appreciation for the baby, for the sweet relationship, for this young woman who shops for others and carries groceries out to their cars, all of it. But what stood out is the feeling of genuine kindness, especially emanating from that young mom. She just was kindness and love. And it was impactful. I could feel it in her presence as it flowed over me as well. I could feel it so deeply. I left that interaction that afternoon with those 2 kind people feeling very different than when I arrived. And that is what makes all the difference. The more we practice compassion, the more we embody it, are it, and share it with the world. It's powerful and impactful. Kelly McGonigal is part of a program at Stanford University that teaches compassion. It's actually compassion training is the name of the program. She offers these suggestions for practice. Okay? It requires energy and resources. So you have to take care of yourself. Set boundaries. Take breaks and play and rest. Step in when you can and step out when you need to. Do a grounding practice when empathy becomes too much. Also distancing, pull back to have a bigger perspective when in empathetic stress. This allows us to connect with the part of ourselves that has a role to play. And if you're a sensitive, empathetic person, you can leverage your sensitivity to create more balance, meaning use your sensitivity to savor the good. Also, wholesome hope. Positive empathy, looking for the good. Sympathetic joy. We have to practice these things. Allowing yourself to be uplifted by witnessing other people's exchanges of compassion. Practice Tonglen when out in public to strengthen the compassionate response. When we're familiar with the true nature of our consciousness as boundless and peaceful, we may feel a more heartfelt resonance with that ultimate statement of compassion expressed by Shantideva with such transcendent beauty. For as long as space endures and for as long as living beings remain, until then may I too abide to dispel the misery of the world. Thank you all for your kind patience.